there's those three essential elements still need to occur no matter what software you have. And same thing, like we have our algorithms that we build at Salesforce, which is like a great software. We have put in a lot of time and a lot of energy and a lot of effort. But I also, when I speak to my customers, I say, like, you still need to be involved in the first 6 months to a year to sometimes 3 years, and make sure that the data that is coming in is accurate data. The data has been prepped correctly. And the outputs are the outputs that you are expecting as a human. And so then you train the machine to then have the correct output.
Wow. Okay. Yo, this is Christian D. Evans with Journey with Christian D. Evans podcast. Guys, thank you so much for tuning in and listening to our amazing podcast. This is where we reveal the top 1% of business concepts and systems and processes to scale 8 and 9 figure businesses. We interview top level 8 and 9 figure CEOs, business owners, and amazing TEDx speakers like David Meltzer. We got Nick Cavuto, Pascal Bachman, and so many others. And if you feel like this resonates with you, please share this with your friend, your family, and make sure you impact them as well, because we're trying to spread the message on those that do not know how to scale 8, 9 figure businesses and talking higher level business concepts. So guys, remember, enjoy the episode and be uncommon if you can. Cheers. Thank you so much for tuning in to Journey with Christian D. Evans podcast. I am your host, Christian D. Evans. And we have a previous co-founder of a SaaS company on today. And the reason why I wanted to have her on is because she was able to scale it and exit. And now she is able to do incredible things with her knowledge and resources. She is passionate. She was a former female CTO who has been bridging the gap between healthcare and technology for over 12 years. With over 23 years of experience in technology and in 12 years in healthcare, she's passionate about health, IT innovations, innovation strategy, and solving healthcare problems, which definitely need to be solved. She's a former entrepreneur, co-founder, and CTO of Easy Scripts, developed the first proprietary algorithm for medication price transparency in the US, voted top telehealth software provider, interviewed by Melinda Gates for her work, and acquired after 7 years of operations. My friend, Gule Sheikh. How are you doing today?
I'm good. It's Gule, by the way.
Gule Sheikh. I'll make sure I do that intro again. Gule, I really appreciate it. I'm looking forward to this conversation as well, and diving into not only your incredible knowledge in the healthcare industry, but also your experience in that software business operation side of things. So before we dive into it, though, I'd love to get your story on how you were interviewed by Melinda Gates and what that felt like.
Oh, thank you. Well, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here. My interview with Melinda Gates was when I was working, head down in our company. We had just raised capital, about $2+ million for our software, and we were scaling our business. And I was working with an accelerator program for women in STEM, and they reached out and said that Melinda Gates was looking to speak to a few entrepreneurs in the Midwest, anyone who had raised over $2 million. And she wanted to speak specifically to female entrepreneurs to understand the challenges in the Midwest as a female entrepreneur, as an investor, as someone raising capital and getting investment, and then anything else that went along with that. So that's how that came to be. It was a very exciting experience, I have to say. It didn't feel like I was speaking to anyone like a celebrity, because she was so humble. She was very down to earth, and it was just very conversational. It didn't feel like an interview. It didn't feel as though, she was trying to extrapolate certain information or anything. It just felt very conversational and very natural speaking with her. And I really appreciated that.
That's awesome. And so let me ask you this, because being able to have that relationship with Melinda, and like you said, just having that conversation, right? What was that able to help you kind of expand more of the problems in healthcare, and being able to kind of really just, shed some light on what your company did at that time when you owned it?
The interview wasn't specifically meant for helping my company in any way whatsoever. It was more of a information sharing and understanding the challenges in the Midwest. She works with a lot of female entrepreneurs, and she is an investor herself. She did not end up investing in me, and that wasn't the actual plan either. So I would say, I don't know if it actually helped me in any way. It was just a cool experience to have, to be able to share those experiences, but it wasn't something that we were able to raise more money out of that at all. It was solely because she was doing a book tour. She wanted to understand what are the challenges that um, female entrepreneurs face when they're raising capital. And I think that was something that was a long-term path for her to understand, as she's writing her book, or as she's going as an investor into other companies, what she should look out for.
No, that makes perfect sense. And that's really awesome to have that conversation. And so, that's a really good kind of pivot a little bit. So as a female and a very professional individual, outside of that, when you were building your company, let's walk through that story a little bit. Did you run into those deadlocks?
Yeah, and I did, and I didn't associate majority of my roadblocks with being a female. I associated them as being an entrepreneur. So just going back initially when we started the company, I bootstrapped the entire company. So I put in an initial investment of my own, about $150,000. And so I was very frugal with how I spent my money, and very, I watched every dollar and dime that I spent on all the technology and the developers and the process. And I wanted to be as efficient as possible and stretch that out as much as I could. And then we got to a point where we didn't have a choice, but we had to raise capital. So then we started raising money from seed investors and angel investors before we went on to getting venture capital. And so that was the initial process that we went through, like from a financial standpoint. In terms of roadblocks, it was very difficult. I think just being in the Midwest alone. Midwest is a very conservative environment, a conservative space where a lot of investors are very wary. I was a new entrepreneur. Although I have a lot of experience as in my corporate background, I was still relatively new, so no one really knew who I was. And if you're familiar with investments, majority of investments do fail. So it's really, I think the stats are 2% of companies will surpass their longevity and their predictions. And so, it's a difficult space. So investors want to be careful who they invest in and the technology. To be perfectly frank, I didn't see the e-prescribing space as a very sexy new app or innovative idea, but it was innovative in that it was changing the process. It was catered towards telehealth companies, and we built, algorithms in place. But to an investor was just like, well, it's a kind of a boring idea. It's a boring concept. So, that was part of our challenges, is like, why would it grow? I think like a lot of people just couldn't see that black and white growth figure. And so we ran into those types of challenges. And honestly, as an entrepreneur, you have to prove yourself. You have to prove that you're going to last, you're going to get through the hardships, you're going to get through your first couple of clients. In some cases, you may have a new idea or a new company, but you are a serial entrepreneur that has exited several times. And so investors know you. They've already invested in either your idea or they've seen you. So there's just a lot of different areas that you have to think about as a new entrepreneur.
Yeah, and what is so interesting is you don't know until you start actually going through the process. And I love that. I love what you said there. Now, when you were walking through this, okay, obviously having the VC and the angel investors, like you said, you're shoving all this money and resource and revenue into it. Okay. My question is, where did you allocate it? What were the best return on investment of that resource and investment, that money? Because I understand running a business, it's very easy to spend money. So I'd love to get your response on what you see. And like when you were building that software company, what did that look like? What were the best channels to invest in?
Yeah. So I would say 80% of our money we spent on the product. It was IT. I mean, IT in general is very expensive, but anything that had to do with, getting the product out, developing the product, the new features, customer feedback that came in saying that we want, these types of features to make our life easier. We would do like a whole ROI on it to see if other customers would want something similar. In most cases, especially in our early days, we had a bit more control. So any new feature a customer asked for, we were 99% positive we were going to build it out. The other area I would say in the technology sector was anything that had to do with regulations, certifications, audit related areas. We also put money into that for compliance reasons as well. So 80% of our money was spent on that. The other 20% would be marketing, sales. Again, we were very frugal, so we tried to be very tight on our spend, how we spent that. We didn't do a lot of travel back then, but we tried. And if we did do travel, we were conservative with how we spent that money, and we went for big clients. Yeah, so I would say that was mostly the split, like probably 80-20.
Gotcha. And I really appreciate you sharing that. And that's kind of what we see overall, but 20% in marketing, that's actually very rare. Normally it's like 80% of marketing and then 20% on the back end. So that's kind of cool to see that in regards to like what your strategy was. And obviously it was very effective. Now let's kind of walk through, you were more on the strategic side of things, how to, if you could just walk me through what was that look like and what did you see in regards to like some missteps that you guys had and that learning experience from that.
Yeah, it's hard to know because I'm a very thorough, detail-oriented planner. And so even when I build out the strategy, I want to think through every single scenario that could go wrong. But as an entrepreneur, you can't possibly think of every scenario that could go wrong because you don't know. And in healthcare, you also can't predict that, because in healthcare, a lot of the things that could go wrong end up being around regulatory or compliance related issues. So not or customers, even where customers may back out last minute. So you end up spending some money implementing, integrating, meeting all the compliance and regulatory requirements, but then a customer backs out last minute. Those are things you just don't have control over. So the things that I did have control over were understanding the market, understanding the challenges in the market, speaking to other providers, hospital systems on why they would or why they would not invest in this type of new technology, what it would take, how long would it take for them to turn over using a previous or another competitor or a current feature that they already have implemented in their system to using something like our software. So planning all of that out was very crucial. And then understanding the market, we made a very intentional decision to go after the telehealth space because it was remote. We saw a need that providers are going to be strapped for time. And so for very simple interactions with their patients, they're going to want to do like a very quick visit using telehealth. So those are things that we basically spend a lot of time understanding that space as well. And luckily, that was a good space to get into. We were still in the early stages. I would say the missteps would be, we thought the growth would be faster than we had anticipated. So the growth that we were looking at were industry trends, market predictions. And I think they had said by 2020, it would be 80% of users would be using telehealth and whatnot. And I think we sold in 2019. Yeah, in 2019. So pre-pandemic, right? So we didn't know the pandemic was going to happen. So I guess in some ways the predictions were correct, but even with the predictions prior to the pandemic still didn't match the predictions of the industry. So the pandemic did accelerate technology use when it came to telehealth significantly. But even as I'm looking back, even with the pandemic, it still didn't match what the predictions were from 5-10 years ago of the usage of telehealth. So that's interesting, right? Like you do an assessment of what you were thinking back then and a reassessment of where you are right now. And it kind of gives you an idea of how to look at future trends of other areas in the healthcare space.
Well, see, speaking of the healthcare space, and I appreciate you kind of explaining that a little bit because, see, it's really cool to see how you built that foundation and it was not a need. And now all of a sudden there's this massive need, demand for it. And naturally, of course, that's how it was able to scale. And you're probably seeing, that technology ever since that exit being used everywhere. Now, my question is, I think you and I see that there are a lot of very archaic things that the healthcare industry still does. And whether, and I've heard, from the physician standpoint to the healthcare, provider standpoint to the, client themselves that are leveraging it. What, just overall, give me a 30,000 picture view of what's going on, you think? And, also kind of what do you think needs to be solved because I like to just, I know that's a kind of an overarching question, but I like to dive into that first. And then, of course, we can dive deeper.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many different things that need to be solved. If I would say there's one major area that I'm seeing the most that consumers can actually, and when I say consumers, I say, the everyday general public can actually get involved in more, is behavior change. So a lot of the issues right now in terms of preventative issues that patients are facing and hospitals are overrun is due to preventative care issues. So whether you have diabetes or heart disease or some other chronic disease, in a lot of cases, you can actually manage your health more effectively and reduce the time that is overburdening. And I don't mean to say that patients are overburdening potentially, and they shouldn't go to the hospital. But what is happening right now is the providers and the health systems only have so much control in managing someone's care. So if you go to a physician, to your primary care, or to the hospital because of a emergency issue, in many cases, I would say about at least 20 to 30% of cases, those issues could have been prevented. And what's occurring now is the hospitals are overrun. They can't see everyone. There's a lot of healthcare over expenditure and debt the hospital systems are seeing, and also consumers are seeing. So if we can better manage our health, that would actually help the economy, but also the health systems, so they can focus their attention on areas that are not preventable and areas of innovation and making things a lot more efficient and better. But unfortunately, everyone is running on fumes right now. The pandemic has seen that as well. Where hospitals are overrun, providers are seeing so many different patients, and then patients are getting sicker. And I don't think it's anyone's fault per se, but I think there's a lot of areas where, if people take more control of their health, they can actually manage things a lot better. And a lot of that has to do with behavior change.
I like that approach because it is self responsibility is really the solution, right? It's saying, hey, you know what? Don't eat so many Doritos, don't eat so many Twinkies, right? Now I'm just making that a little facetious,
Yeah,
but you get the
yeah,
point though. It's like having those preventative care measures. Now my question is, because I always think, like structurally how you incentivize that, right? You got to incentivize the right behavior. What do you
right.
think, whether it might be culturally, whether it's the government, whether it's healthcare, that could incentivize that right behavior? What would you suggest?
I think every aspect of health, like every step of the way, there are incentives that could be put in. So I think insurance companies could put in incentives, and I think some of them are doing that. They're providing options for either gym memberships or diet consults and things like that. And providers can also get involved in incentivizing. They can create more efficient, or either create apps where it incentivizes patients to have better track of their health records and their health status. That also would be efficient in terms of providers having access to the information in real time. So, we have a lot of people nowadays wear smartwatches, and they have smartphones, whether it's Android or iPhone. And in many cases, like I know with the iPhone, you have like the health stats. You can update that on a regular basis. Things like that, integrating that into the provider's systems would be helpful for the provider to be on top of what is happening in terms of that person's health. There can be triggers that are put in place. So if a provider sees that, I don't know, let's give an example. This patient is not getting as many steps in place. Like maybe this patient only got 500 steps consistently for the last month. Okay, is there something going on? Is this patient usually a bit more active? Are they staying home more? Is there depression potentially on the increase? Are they just not getting out? Are they more isolated than normal? Things like that. There's certain things, triggers that can be put in place that would help the providers to understand what is going on from a lifestyle perspective. And then, your social circle. I think having a good, healthy social circle around you, being in touch with the people that are responsible for your health. So, in my studies, it's been, provider, pharmacist, maybe a nurse care practitioner, a dietitian, having those people all involved in your healthcare and checking up on you, and then you keeping a status with them is also very helpful in terms of managing your health. And finally, the other incentive is not getting sick, right? So if you don't get sick, you're not going to spend a lot of money out of pocket, out of work, out of commission with having a quality of life with your family members or your friends or your active lifestyle. So I think there's just so many different incentives that can be built in, but you're right. I think having incentives built in is helpful, but every aspect needs to have every step of the way you need to have some incentives along the way to start triggering some of those behavior changes.
Yeah, because it's so funny because no matter how much data is out there that says smoking is bad, you always see people smoking, right? And it's just so it's so funny to me. However, that you can't fix stupid sometimes, and that's okay, right? There's always going to be those individuals, but like you said, incentivizing the right behavior, and majority of the time, the way to do that is obviously financial. And that's one of the reasons why I want to get your perspective because I've seen that. Like I think my health insurance, they give you a free membership, they do all these things. Like if you do the XYZ, then that allows you to get more bonus or more money in your health savings account or whatever it is. They'll just keep putting money into it, and that obviously incentivizes the right behavior, which is really awesome. Now you did mention something I want to kind of loop back around on the concept of how technology and healthcare can be integrated to really basically, like you said, facilitate more of that healthy lifestyle and behavior. And I'd love to just kind of get your perspective because you're in this industry way more than I am. What are you seeing in regards to like the technology, leveraging AI, leveraging this stuff to be able to say, okay, hey, not only your phone, but there are certain metrics, certain things that we're measuring that have never been measured before at a very, very micro level. And I'd love to get your response to what you're seeing.
Yeah, I mean, I love that you brought up AI because that's something I'm very close and passionate to, especially as of the last year or so. So there's a lot of data that's out there now, and I think what the great thing is that a lot of health systems are now starting to provide easier access to patients to get their health records and get the information. The areas that are still being understood and there's a lot more focus on now is how do you leverage AI to get better predictions on a patient's healthcare. So we have population health data overall publicly in the US. I think using some of that, leveraging that information is very helpful to providers. The one area is now understanding health equity and the bias around health equity algorithms and building them in effectively. A lot of algorithms currently that are built into the systems have been built in some cases, some of them were built in the 80s and 90s, and there are some biases intentionally or unintentionally that have been built into the systems. So the outcomes and the outputs that you're getting from that information may not line up to what the goals are of the health system. I'll give like one example of, for example, like in certain populations, the algorithms that may be built in are around like who are the highest spenders when it comes to healthcare. Well, the people that you're not going to reach with that algorithm are the underserved communities because mostly underserved communities are either not going to have time to end up to go to the hospital or go in a timely fashion to their provider, whether because they're working 3 different jobs or it's not, easy to get to, or it's expensive, or their out of pocket's going to be a lot. So in those cases, those underserved communities are not ending up in the hospital until sometimes it's too late. So are those people really the high spenders? Not really, because they're not even getting the care initially, or they're not getting triggered early on, and they're ending up in the hospital. Versus someone else, who may be middle class or upper class and have really great insurance and they're doing their regular checkups. The minute something goes wrong, then they go to their doctor, they get checked in because they can't afford to not miss work. So there's that level of issues that we are now seeing that the underserved communities were not it wasn't thought through of how to reach them. So the outreach to those communities is essential right now, and understanding how to get that. And we can build some of that with AI, but the current algorithms, I don't want to speak just broadly and say like they don't exist. They do exist, but now there's a lot more focus on how do we actually get the right information. And the only way to get the right information is by these communities and us engaging with them to understand like what is actually going on with their health on a regular basis.
Well, I love what you're saying, and I think it's so awesome that you have such a heart for that, for the underprivileged, because like you said, and that's one of the reasons why I love the technology, because in essence, if deployed effectively, you can really that concept of, hey, a rise tide lifts all boats kind of concept, right? Hey, this is able to also impact this class over here, this demographic, that then can also help engage, and so much. Are you tracking any specific technology in the healthcare field that are doing this effectively right now? Would you say any companies in particular or anything like that you're seeing?
Yeah, so I am getting close to understanding what the algorithms and the biases are right now. So I'm doing a lot of research, and I work for Salesforce. And so as part of Salesforce, like we are very invested in understanding what the predictions and the machine learning and the modeling around it. And so as part of my job, I'm trying to understand like where the biases exist and how we can help our customers in that space. So there's a lot, right? Like I couldn't say that any particular company is doing one thing well, because there's so much that is there are so many gaps right now currently in the industry. So just understanding those gaps, I feel like, is the first step. And then once we understand what those gaps are and what the true goal is of those, health systems, for example, like, maybe like insurance, for example, like insurance, they build their risk scores based on some of these algorithms and the outputs they get from the providers in the health systems. And so they then measure patients in different categories. So understanding those gaps right now is like where like I'm trying to focus most of my attention on.
So would you say there are, speaking of gaps, then would you say there are some technology or some algorithms or some software that is not developed yet that needs to be developed to be able to facilitate that transaction?
Yeah, it's a bit more of a complex answer than that. So the thing is with technology and the algorithms, they're developed by people, right? So it doesn't matter if you have a technology or if you have a product out there, they're still managed, and the logic behind it is still developed by people. So let's give machine learning as an example. So you throw in a bunch of data into these machine learning algorithms, or the systems, and the machine is supposed to learn with time what the correct answer is. However, that still requires intervention by the human, by me, by the providers, to come back and say, okay, well, this is actually correct, this is incorrect. And then with time, the machine just gets better and better. So with that, what we need is we need data, and we need time, and we still need human intervention to make sure that the right occurrences are still occurring. So there's no real software that I can point to and say, oh, go to this software, and throw in all your data, and it's just going to know what to do, because it's just such a great software. There's those three essential elements still need to occur no matter what software you have. And same thing, like we have our algorithms that we build at Salesforce, which is like a great software. We have put in a lot of time and a lot of energy and a lot of effort. But I also, when I speak to my customers, I say, like, you still need to be involved in the first 6 months to a year to sometimes 3 years, and make sure that the data that is coming in is accurate data. The data has been prepped correctly. And the outputs are the outputs that you are expecting as a human. And so then you train the machine to then have the correct output.
Wow. Okay. I appreciate that insight. So now, with that being said, then, do you find that, well, kind of share with me what this next 4 or 5 years look like? Because I do know with the AI, with the technology that's being established, it is more of an exponential curve right now. What do you think? What are you anticipating in the next 4 to 5 years in this industry?
I mean, I think we're going to accelerate very quickly in the next 4 or 5 years. I think with having hospital systems and just healthcare, the healthcare industry in general, all focused on AI and predictions and machine learning, and also like understanding the health equity bias that is currently existing. I think there's going to be a huge acceleration in fixing a lot of those problems, and we're going to see massive growth in that area. And I think we're going to be able to solve a lot of problems. So whether you're looking at cancer patients or diabetes patients, I think we're going to be at a place where we're going to be able to predict those patients prior to them even having any issues right off the bat. And so that way we can actually put in interventions in place prior to patients ending up in the hospital and it's too late.
Well, see, and you're saying something because when you're working with a doctor, there's always this room of error because it's a human error, right? Same thing with
Right.
nurse, whatever, right? And like you said, as you gather more data through the technology and AI, the room of error decreases. Right now, like you said, it needs to be verified by a human. However, at some point, that data will have so much that now the room of error, moving margin of error, is so small. And so my
Right.
question is, do you see at some point being able to say, hey, we're relying more on this AI analysis of this situation, whatever that situation is, cancer, biopsy, whatever it is, versus more of a doctor?
I think it will be a mix. So I think we're never going to be able to replace humans, but machines are definitely going to, they do have an advantage, right? They don't have the bias that's built into them, but then the bias that's built into the machines are built in by the humans. So I think what will happen is we will be able to leverage physicians and clinicians a lot more effectively by reducing their overload and overwork by minutia issues that they need to deal with. And right now, the more brains that we bring together into these algorithms and getting the right accuracy of the information, we'll be able to make the machines better. But they still need to rely on the humans, right? And who knows? Like maybe 10 years from now, then we can have these clinicians that are brilliant people work on more innovative ideas and innovative solutions for other problems where they can't do that right now. A lot like we've seen with not just with COVID, even prior to COVID, but COVID made it worse, is a lot of clinicians are overburdened, overworked. And with that, they can't make as best decisions. So the room for error, I feel, is higher than it could be down the road. So if we can reduce their, them being overworked in areas that they don't need to be, they can actually focus their attention on areas that require greater depth from them.
Yeah, and I love this conversation because as you were talking, I was literally thinking about sometimes, throughout life, and I think we've all experienced this or know someone that's experienced this. You just run and you're going full throttle, and all of a sudden, it's like, oh my gosh, my upper belly is like in pain massively. What's going on? This is abnormal. Then all of a sudden you go in and you have like stage 4 cancer, and it's like, well, there's a lot of steps that had to occur in order to get there, right? And so it's like during that time period, sometimes you may not go to the doctor, or maybe you go to the doctor and for some odd reason it just wasn't checked. Hey, I'm feeling good, I'm looking good, my blood pressure is good, all those check marks. But then there's also that during that time frame, right? And I'm looking at how to leverage that technology, that AI, to integrate it during that period of life where we're just going through life, and then obviously there can be some sort of data analysis during that's being taken at all times, and saying, realizing, okay, hey, there's something going on. It may not, your body may not be rejecting it, but all of a sudden this data is telling us that something's not there and not right. Well, I'd love to get your perspective on that.
Yeah, no, that's great. Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. I think the biggest thing right now is, the more we know about ourselves, the more we can actually control our outcomes, right? So, for example, I see a lot of apps now, like even like meditation apps, they'll ask you questions on like, how are you feeling today? Like, are you feeling neutral, sad, or upset? If you're feeling neutral or if you're feeling sad, like what was it? Is it relationship related? Is it health related? Is it something else? So I think so putting that information in is actually helpful. With over time, you can see if you have more negative feedback that you're providing or negative data that you're collecting, then over time you can see like the trend of where you got to a certain place where now you may have to actually take medication, or you're having anxiety issues, or it's accelerated. The same thing is with, I think, with anything, with diabetes or with cancer. If you start monitoring and tracking certain data points with yourself, then you can actually pinpoint the triggers and where you need to actually take action. And I think things like, the health app with Apple, with the watch, for example, they're now tracking your pulse rate. And so they can actually trigger and send an alert to an emergency contact if your pulse rate is in a danger zone. I think things like that are innovative ideas in terms of the cancer and the diabetes as well, where if you are tracking whether it is how you're feeling, if you're having certain pain in certain areas, maybe target certain age groups or demographic or even zip code, knowing like air quality may not be good in certain areas. So in these areas, there are certain diseases that are more prevalent. Water quality may not be good in certain areas. So, this demographic may experience other conditions related to that. So I think now that we have more information from a population standpoint, those triggers can be sent out to different demographics to start tracking to see how they're doing, and then collect information, and then reach out to those patients, those potential patients that may be in a danger zone or like a high trigger zone for a potential issue.
Yeah, and the reason why I like to bring this up is because I look at like business, right? When you're running a business, you have certain metrics that you are always optimizing for. And it's like you
Yeah.
have a baseline of what's successful, what's not, what's profitable, what's not, right? When you're in the red, when you're in the black. And what's interesting, I look at the same thing with obviously, like you just were talking about health, right? There are certain metrics. And what's so cool about what you're basically saying and leveraging technology and AI to facilitate this is because, you have some sort of baseline, what's healthy, what's not, what's dead, what's not, right? And now all of a sudden, and then what's also is it's custom directly to my genes, my capabilities, my history, my family history, whatever, right? Genetically. And so now all of a sudden I can, instead of just, taking a guess, hey, I don't know what's working, what's not, obviously with the data, like you just said, as it's gathering more and more information, now I'm able to optimize my life and say, oh, the reason why I don't have so much energy is because maybe I need less gluten. How do I decrease the gluten while doing this? Now, all of a sudden you're adjusting, you're modifying, you're going, and every single day you're optimizing for a better healthy lifestyle. And like you said at the beginning of this conversation, behavior changes preventative care.
Yeah.
This is very, very exciting.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you brought up the genetics thing too. And I think that's where people can take control over their health history, is like if you understand your health history in terms of your parents' health history, and then genetically what your predispositions are in terms of your health status. Like I know I'm Asian background, and so heart disease, diabetes is very prevalent in not only in my own family history, but also like in the Asian culture. So I stay on top of that as much as I can to prevent it. Now I could even do a better job at that as well. But I think if people understand their health history a lot better, they can start monitoring and taking control of potential issues for themselves, and then bring that up with their primary care physician, bring that up with the health system, and understand like, hey, look, like I know this is an issue in my family. These are the potential triggers that could occur. What can I control right now? There are things that we can't control. We can't control the air quality around us. We may not be able to control the water that's coming out of our taps. We may not be able to control like what we can afford, what we can't afford, but we can take measures in place and actions in place to do a better job to manage what we can control.
100%. I love it. And that's all it really takes is but leveraging the information out there, leveraging these resources. Now let's kind of pivot a little bit more toward like obviously being able to have a successful exit strategy. And obviously now being able to take the knowledge you have and leverage it for Salesforce and so forth. What do you think certain characteristics or skills, I should say, what skills did you acquire during that time that have been very effective throughout the rest of your life?
Oh man, I think I think there's just a lot of skills. I thought I was, a pretty good strategic planner, and I was resilient and a hard worker prior to having a business of my own. But I would say that accelerated everything probably 100 times when I did that. It's really having a business of your own is really doing a fast track to an MBA, but you're actually executing the MBA at the same time. It's not just knowledge, it's not just theory. So, I had to learn everything. So I've been a technologist for a very long time in my career, and I still consider myself a technologist. Having a business though, I had to learn everything. I had to learn marketing. I had to learn about working with investors and negotiating. And I had to understand what investor terms were, what things investors look for. And I had to understand all the numbers. I had to understand the 10 times exit strategy for investors. I had to understand, even psychology. Like, a lot of investors, they look at the numbers, but then in many cases, 99% of them are going to go with at the end, they're going to sign the deal if they have a good gut feeling about you. And now, mind you, a gut feeling comes with backing yourself up with all of the right information and doing all the right actions and having the right numbers in place. But anything could fail, right? There's a lot of things out of our control. So the investors have to believe in you as a person. So you have to have a good character. You have to be very ethical. You have to be moral. You have to be transparent. You have to have a trusting relationship. And so those are things that are natural characteristics that you have to have in every aspect of your life, whether it is at home or at work. It's the same thing with investors. And I think also you have to be able to pick up on who the right investors are and people that you're working with. So, in some cases, some clients would come in and say, yes, we're going to implement this and we're going to move forward. And then at the last minute, they would just completely back out. So finding, being careful, not jumping the gun and not putting all your eggs in one basket, and understanding the risks involved with every single client and every single person you're involved with, even employees, is very crucial. So I think the people skills are always transferable across the board. Have I had to use my investment knowledge and experience in my current corporate job? Not really, but I appreciate where I'm at right now in terms of understanding what it takes for my company to have built what they've built and how far they've gotten, and the challenges that we face, during these difficult times is also very helpful.
Yeah, that's what I always love to ask, because, like you said, during your business struggle, right, focus, right, you always acquire skills that you may or may not actually be aware of until later on. You're like, oh man, I like you said, there are certain skills that you need to focus on. And that's one of the things that I always tell people whenever I'm consulting for a lot of individuals. The best skill is to be able to collapse time frames and be able to acquire skills. Like, if you can acquire skills faster in a shorter period of time frame, the better you are. And that may just be, like you said, just being able to understand, okay, hey, I need to optimize toward my pitch for a VC, right? Whatever that pitch is. Okay, boom. What are they looking for? 10X. How do I build a business for a 10X exit, right? And whatever. And that because all of a sudden that paradigm shift, it changes drastically. I really appreciate the immense time and value that you brought in today, just talking about artificial intelligence, talking about the healthcare system, talking about how that software and technology is able to revolutionize what's going on, and it's actually happening. We're just trying to stay up to it, which is really exciting. Where can our audience reach out to you and be part of what you got going on?
They can reach out to me at LinkedIn or on Twitter. I'm active on both. That's the best way to reach out to me. And yeah, I try to, put posts out there, and I try to put like latest things that I'm interested in and working on. And right now, big area that I'm just very focused on is health equity algorithms and understanding different customers' needs and the gaps that they're facing, the challenges they're facing, and basically helping to solve those.
I love it. I love it. And, guys, those links will be in the description below. So make sure you click on that. Make sure you just reach out and be part of her community, what she's got going on. And before we let you go, is there any last words of wisdom that you'd like to share with our audience?
So this is a common wisdom I share across the board, but I usually say that, life gets busy, life gets tough, but the people that you're close to, like if you have your top 5, just think about like who are the people that are very important to you, and check up on them. Ask them how their health is. Ask them if anything is going on. And just that small act can play like a big pivotal role in that other person's longevity and quality of their life, and knowing that someone else is actually reaching out and cares for them. So that's just like, it's not, mind blowing or rocket science or anything, but if you have someone you care about, just make sure you check up on them every once in a while and make sure that their health is okay.
I love that. I love that. And that is my friend, Gule Sheikh. Guys, that is Journey with Christian D. Evans podcast. Until next time, remember, be uncommon if you can. Yo, this is Christian D. Evans, Journey with Christian D. Evans podcast. We thank you so much for listening to this amazing episode. If you feel and you know that this was valuable to you, please show some love to our amazing guest by liking this, by commenting on this, by making sure that you do a nice 5-star review and just show some love to our guest. That'd be really awesome. Also, make sure you share this with a friend, a family, a colleague, someone that you believe would bring value to their life right now. And guys, we just want to say thank you again for just being part of our community. If you want to have more resources, don't be afraid. Go to christiandevans.com. You can actually schedule a phone call with me, or you can send me an email at christian.evans@beUncommonIfYouCan.com. That's christian.evans@beUncommonIfYouCan.com. Always love to hear some feedback and let me know what is the number 1 or 2 things that you are struggling in your business and your life, and we'll make sure we have those conversations. Guys, that is Journey with Christian D. Evans podcast, and until next time, remember, be uncommon if you can. Cheers.